grateful that you've chosen to take the time out of your day to be here. I'm Grace Litzu, and I'm Taproot's volunteer community manager. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and my role is really designed to be a direct support for professionals looking to get involved by donating their time and expertise to social good organizations such as those represented in our audience today. So Taproot is super excited to have this opportunity to gather nonprofits, leaders, community members for discussion on developing sustainable fundraising strategies. And we know this is a topic that is always top of mind, but maybe it's feeling a little bit more top of mind given some recent changes and some uncertainty in the fundraising environment. We'll get into more detail, but Taproot is a nonprofit who exists to serve nonprofits, and we aim to create resources and spaces for discussion with needs of community members in mind. So we're really grateful to have the ability to bring you all together for events such as this, and we hope that it will be not only an opportunity to learn, but also an opportunity to feel connected and supported. So as people are kind of trickling in, I invite you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. So feel free to share your name, where you're joining us from, and a little bit about your organization or the organization you represent. We definitely encourage you all to be active in the chat. Use it to ask questions, to connect with others, and to keep the discussion going. But we've got a packed event ahead of us, so we'll jump right in. I see Paul introduced himself. Everyone is welcome to do the same. But yeah, we'll jump right in, and I'd love to see those introductions. Keep them coming. All right, so our primary goal of today's event, as I mentioned, is to share some thoughts and strategies to help you develop and drive your fundraising infrastructure forward. To do so, we'll spend the bulk of our time hearing from our three panelists who have so graciously dedicated time to preparing and bringing insights to today. We'll hear from their perspective and expertise as development professionals and nonprofit leaders themselves. And I know there's a wide variety of individuals who have joined us from nonprofits, small businesses, to volunteers. So while we're certainly excited and appreciate all types of attendees, I do want to note that our discussion will mostly be tailored towards the nonprofit audience. So regardless, there's definitely something to learn for everyone. Before we get into that much anticipated conversation, I wanted to start with a little bit of context about Taproot. So I'll dive into some basics about who we are. After this brief background, we'll get right into that conversation with the panelists. We definitely encourage you all to add questions and thoughts to the chat throughout this discussion, just as you're doing with those introductions. Much appreciated. Again, keep those coming. But yeah, use the chat. We appreciate that interaction, and we'll do our best to address questions in a Q&A at the end. But before we get to that Q&A after our conversation, we'll take a brief pause and give our panelists a much needed break to discuss some exciting resources that Taproot has created for you all to hopefully help you utilize Taproot as a support in your fundraising infrastructure needs. And we hope that this combination of discussion and resource sharing will help you feel more confident in how to best approach building your fundraising systems and structures. All that said, it's important to note that we won't be connecting you directly to funding opportunities in this conversation. Rather, we'll encourage you to consider how to prepare and grow your organization so it's equipped to shift as your needs change and as the world around us changes. And that's also why I'll reiterate that last point on the screen and our secondary goal today, which is community. We know it can feel isolating to be in your shoes, and we want to make sure that you don't feel alone, that you feel supported by other people joining and by the Taproot team as well. A few logistical notes. So I've been talking for a little bit. Hopefully you can hear me and are starting to feel comfortable with the webinar format. That we've enabled closed captioning. So if you are seeing that on your screen, you can read along as we're talking. But if that's something that's annoying to you, you can turn that off by clicking on the kind of gear button under our presenter faces and turning off live transcription. Another note, this is being recorded, so you'll receive the recording and the slides in follow-up resources. No need to jot everything down and keep up with us, but definitely excited to share that out afterwards. And Kristen Maiku is another member of the Taproot team. She's joined us, and you'll see her in the chat. She's helping with some logistics information, and if you have questions, she'll also be monitoring that. All right, so as I promised, we'll start with a little bit of background about Taproot. So let's dig in there. As I shared at the very beginning, Taproot is a nonprofit that exists to serve our fellow nonprofits. So Taproot was founded in way back in 2001 with the knowledge that there's a resource gap in the social sector. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a little bit when I say that, but organizations who are like yourselves, who are dedicated to serving your communities and addressing the world's most pressing social challenges, often don't have the financial means or staff capacity to carry out missions to the fullest extent. And so Taproot exists to increase this access to resources for nonprofits, regardless of your mission area, budget size, or years in operation. And we're really excited to do so. And we do this in kind of three main buckets. So that first bucket is Taproot Plus. This is likely where you know us from. This is our open source free access marketplace. And it's not all that Taproot does, but it is something that we pride ourselves on. Taproot Plus enables you and your nonprofit team to request and manage support from skilled business professionals. Taproot Plus is, as I mentioned, a free open access online platform that connects marketing, human resources, technology, strategy, finance, and operations professionals with opportunities to assist nonprofits and small businesses in need of expertise. And so we really exist to democratize this access to high quality business support for organizations like yourselves. And Taproot Plus is accessible to charitable organizations registered in the US, UK, EU, India, and Canada, and always looking to kind of expand that reach. Our base of organizations is a growing community of 25,000 plus nonprofit organizations. Another bucket is our advisory services, and this is how we fuel our work of creating connections between your organizations and dedicated volunteers. So Taproot partners with forward-thinking companies and grant makers to develop custom skills-based volunteering programs. Our advisory services team has collaborated with over 100 Fortune 500 companies and other organizations to match the expertise of their employees with nonprofits and small businesses who need support. So, our team of consultants works intensively with employers, CSR, and HR teams to provide unique volunteering opportunities with causes and communities they care about. We share information on sponsored local or team-based volunteer opportunities with nonprofit community members whenever available. When funding from a Taproot grant maker or corporate partner enables us, we're able to host local or in-person pro bono events or programs that match nonprofits with groups of volunteers. And so you'll hear about these events as they come up. If you're working directly with a corporate or grant maker partner that is a client of Taproot's, you'll hear from them, or through your Taproot Plus account if an open access event becomes available in your region. And then lastly, we also pride ourselves on field building. And this comes from our dedication to serving our fellow nonprofits, as I've mentioned, through mobilizing a deeper level of volunteerism and community engagement. As such, we're here to change hearts and minds. That's really what we're all about, and making it so that every nonprofit has access to the professional infrastructure and capacity resources needed. As part of this, we regularly conduct nonprofit and skills-based volunteerism sector research, develop resources in areas such as connecting skill-based volunteering to inclusive professional development, building resiliency at nonprofits, etc. We more and more, right? We also maintain a stocked calendar of community events, and this is one of those such events that are really tailored for education and community building. And all of this kind of encapsulates this category of field building. And these are always free of cost. Our nonprofit, again, is dedicated to empowering the growth of high quality skills based volunteerism to ensure equitable access for nonprofits. So I've mentioned a couple times skills-based volunteering, and you might now be asking yourself, "Hey, you keep saying this term, but I'm not really sure what it means." So I'll just take a step back and define skills-based volunteering and a couple of its benefits. So skills-based volunteering is what we think of as a donation of someone's abilities, talents, networks, and resources to social good organizations. You may be comfortable or familiar with the term pro bono volunteering or pro bono consulting, and that is synonymous with skills based volunteering. Um, Pro bono is really common in the legal field, which has a really well established ethic of donating professional capacity. But why stop there? Taproot recognizes that every individual has a unique skill or capacity to share something, and we really want to tap into that in order to make pro bono widely used in the field beyond legal and medical. Um, Sorry, I got those switched here. So, skills based volunteering offers many benefits, as I've mentioned, both to nonprofits and volunteers. And really, this is my favorite part of skills based volunteering is that mutuality and the shared learning that comes from it. For nonprofits like yourselves, working with skilled volunteers can fill some experience gaps. We know that you all are comfortable wearing lots of hats and are often put into positions where you need to be agile and thinking of things in lots of different ways. But one thing that skills based volunteering can do is kind of add some capacity. It helps you think about things in different ways and is a great way to add that capacity to serve your community and do what you're uniquely great at. Additionally, it's a wonderful community builder. As you kind of have continued to talk in the chat, it's community building for you to each other to feel like there's other nonprofits around you. It's community building with professionals, and it's also a way to create some lasting connections. While it's not expected or required, we often see volunteers and nonprofits develop strong relationships that extend way beyond the taproot engagement, which is really beautiful to see. Also, it just can't be understated how impactful this form of volunteering can be. Beyond sharing expertise and having that kind of mutual learning, it's an opportunity for sustainable growth of your organization. And as we get into our conversation, we'll talk about sustainable growth for your fundraising needs. And it's another great way to think about growing your organization's capacity. And when I talk about impact, we don't only mean that it's kind of capacity building impact or impactful for your organization's ability to serve your community, but we've actually been able to establish the average hourly benefit of a donation of time. So when you work with a skilled volunteer, an hour of time is about equal to $220 donation. So that's kind of something we like to highlight as the impact of skilled volunteering. And then lastly, I'll just kind of provide the summary glance of Taproot by the numbers. So this is just a little bit of a summary of who we serve and how we serve them in the nonprofit space. All right, so thank you all for bearing with me through that background and context. Hopefully, if you're new to Taproot, that gives you a little bit of a better sense of who we are and how we can support your work. But as promised, I wanted to quickly get us into our panel discussion. And when we jump in, I'll let each panelist kind of introduce themselves in a little bit greater detail. But we're joined today by Jill Salter, who is a nonprofit communications writer and philanthropy. Um, Sorry, my notes went away. Philanthropy. Um, expert. And we're also joined by Nicole Druckman, who is a freelance grant writer, and Josh Groll, who is one of our own, who is going to join with the nonprofit perspective, and from his work in working with nonprofits extensively at Taproot. So we'll go ahead and get it started with a deeper dive into those introductions. And maybe, Jill, I'll invite you to come off mute and share about yourself.
Hello, happy to be here today. I have been in nonprofit for over 20 years, worked for 2 major organizations, and past 5 years now, I've been working as a volunteer. I've worked with over 100 small nonprofits, helping them in a variety of capacities, and I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill. Nicole, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Grace. I'm Nicole Druckman. I'm based in Rochester, New York, lived in the Chicago area before this, and I've been in the grant writing field for almost 30 years, which is kind of hard to believe for myself to believe that. So I've worked in a bunch of different organizations, from social services to the visual arts to medical research and some others. So really happy to be here and to see the wide range of people that have tuned in. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Nicole. And Josh, you want to round us out?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh. Some of you already know me. I recognize some of the names here. I am the nonprofit success coach here at Taproot. I am basically here as a frontline resource for all of our nonprofits interested in engaging with skilled volunteers and using our online marketplace. So I'm here to kind of represent the nonprofit perspective. I've had a lot of conversations recently with nonprofits about fundraising in particular. So very, very happy to be here. Thank you, Grace.
Yeah, of course. And I'm so excited that we have such a variety of voices on this panel. I've had the privilege of having some background conversations, and really excited about the group we have today. I think the best place to get us going with this conversation is to kind of talk about the foundation a little bit. Thinking about fundraising can be really overwhelming. It's a very large topic. And so I'm wondering, when thinking about sustainable fundraising infrastructure, where should a nonprofit start? And I know that's a very large question, but Josh, I'll kick it to you to get us started with tackling that question of where do we start?
Yeah, so I'd actually like to just start my comments off by, if I may, reading a wonderful quote from a fundraiser named Christine Groom. She's been in the business for decades, and she puts my thoughts about this actually pretty succinctly. So they're not just my thoughts; they're another development professional's thoughts as well. And she just says, "People go wrong by not having a plan. They start out by assuming that they should simply write a grant or ask for money, and you can't just look at a grid of fundraising techniques and say, I'll do some of this, I'll do some of that, unless there is a connect between the financial need that you have and the assets that you have as a nonprofit to support that need, such as board contacts or interests on the part of foundations, then it's not going to happen. So a lot of times when I talk to nonprofits about fundraising, it's trying to kind of understand or get them to have a broader understanding of fundraising as kind of an end goal. But really, fundraising it's kind of like, eating your Wheaties or diet and exercise. It's not something you're just doing as a one-off. It's something you should be doing kind of all the time. And if your marketing communications presence is working and your HR is working and your business strategy presence is working along with your information technology, that kind of synergy of all those things kind of combined, I think helps create a incredibly stable fundraising infrastructure. So I guess that's kind of how I like to kick us off is think about maintaining and building that infrastructure. Obviously, it's going to be additive. It's going to accumulate over time. But it's never just kind of a one-off thing that you're going to be doing just once. So you'll want to be maintaining the, the infrastructure kind of over time and kind of feeding it, nurturing it, and watering it. So oftentimes, if you're like, well, we need money, we need fundraising, you might want to ask yourself, okay, fundraising is the end goal, but what's preventing us like right now from achieving those goals? And is it something to do with marketing? Is it the fact that we don't have very good social media presence? Does it have maybe more to do with the fact that we don't have the right software? We can't even take in donations on our website right now. That's like an information technology need. So I encourage everyone, when you think about fundraising, break it down into those root causes of the pain points you had in your fundraising efforts. What's preventing you from building out that infrastructure? And then you will have a better idea of the types of projects that you need to engage on to build out that infrastructure. So that's kind of how I lay the foundation, about laying the foundation, so to speak.
Absolutely. And thank you for that perspective of kind of thinking of fundraising in a systems kind of way. But Jill, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this question of what do we do to break it down? Where do we get started?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have some thoughts on this. Today's landscape may seem frightening, but we've been through tough times before, and people are resilient and they find a way. So my advice is to be strategic and not scared. Lately, I've seen on LinkedIn that people say nonprofit work is an art and a science, and I don't believe that. For me, as I see it, working with all these many nonprofits, is that a nonprofit is a business. Your shareholders are your donors and your board. Your customers are the people you help. Your product is the mission you're selling, and the profit is the intangible success of the work you do, whether it's feeding people or housing them or arts education or medical research. So, and you run departments, you have fundraising, accounting, marketing, human resources. So you need to choose your systems well, meaning be strategic in all that you do. And I think that it starts with two acronyms, SWOT and SMART. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can do a SWOT analysis for your whole organization, but today we're talking about fundraising. So I would suggest that you do a SWOT analysis. You analyze what makes you strong, what makes you weak, where the opportunities are, and what the threats to your progress might be. And once you've done that, and I would say do that with everybody in your organization, not only your staff, but your board and your volunteers, because everybody has a different perspective. If you only do it with your staff, then you're missing key elements from the board and your volunteers. And once you've done a SWOT analysis and identified what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are, then you can be able to set your goals. What do you want to accomplish? And then the goals are called SMART goals. That's the second acronym. SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So you have specific goals that you're going to meet in a specified amount of time. When you've done that, then you can construct a strategic plan, and beyond that, a fundraising plan, and that becomes your roadmap. So those are my suggestions for taking heart and making the best of your opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Jill, for that perspective of kind of start with a plan, as Josh said, but also you want to be strategic about it. And before you get into the planning piece, you need to have an understanding of where you're going. And so SWOT and SMART. I think there's some questions about SMART in the chat, and I'll make sure to come back to those later. But I'd love to hear, Nicole, your perspective on this question.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, actually, I think our answers are pretty similar. I jotted down the following notes about when posed with this question by Grace. when we were preparing, and I said I'd answer this question by saying that nonprofits start by really identifying what their priorities are for that fiscal year. So in previous positions that I've had, that has come from our senior leadership, as informed by the board, but also the strategic plan, if you have one at your organization, is the guiding star as well as the mission statement in determining priorities. And then it's easier once you have maybe 3 or a certain amount of programs you're really focusing on that year to hone in on your fundraising. And I'm from, have the grants perspective. So that's what you would be really focusing your grants prospecting on. And then just delving a little deeper into the grants. I know in my previous positions, we have asked some questions to ourselves about a grant opportunity. Some of those questions are, is the grant mission aligned? So again, just really focusing on what is our mission and not chasing grants that don't really fit your mission. That's not a really good practice. Does it match agency priorities? Like I mentioned, can we be competitive? And there can be the sense of geography here too. Like if you're in New York and this foundation funds in California primarily, that's probably not your best shot. What's the amount? Sometimes you might want to set a goal, like we want grants that are $10,000 or over and that type of thing. And then what else did I have down here? Geography, I just mentioned. Are they willing to fund a new organization? Some foundations I found might already have their workforce development programs that they're funding. And even though you do that work, they're not taking on another organization to fund. And then also, is there a matching requirement? Sometimes there's a match, like, they'll give you 50,000 if you can raise 50,000, or you have 50,000 in other funding sources. And sometimes you don't really have that. So those are just some questions to sort of help with the grants in particular, prospecting and knowing what to go for, because there are so many opportunities and there's only so many human resources to make it all happen, to get in all those proposals. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's some really helpful context of, I think we've heard from, we start with the plan and then you have to be strategic about maybe breaking it down into the fiscal year more specifically, as Nicole, you mentioned. Then for the grant perspective, thinking about what are your priorities, and that really goes back to the SWOT analysis and your mission and your SMART goals that come around that. So I appreciate that well-rounded, I think, perspective on that question. But I do think that there's a lot that we're balancing when it comes to all of those things. And I am curious to hear from you all, what are some common challenges that you've encountered in your work with nonprofits when it comes to fundraising, or maybe directly, and how have you addressed some of these challenges, or how would you address some of these challenges? And maybe Jill, we can start with you.
Sure. I think there are 3 major challenges that probably affect many of the people on this call. I think for some executive directors, asking for donations is uncomfortable. I've found that more often than you might think among people that I've spoken to. And that's basically because they haven't been trained. They really have never done it before. And they feel lonely sometimes because the board is not helping to pave the way. I think the best thing to do is to try to find a way to be comfortable. And in my thinking, I used to say, I'm not asking for myself, I'm asking for the organization. So it sort of puts a little distance. You're not asking for a handout, you're asking for a donation to help people. If you put a little distance between you and the ask, then it becomes a little more comfortable. So that's one major challenge I've seen. I think from the board perspective, board members often feel uncomfortable having to solicit friends and associates. And here, I think the best thing to do is to change the mindset. Think of your board members as your partners and your cheerleaders and your ambassadors, and let them know that. and provide them with an elevator speech and encourage them to tell it to whoever they know. Don't intimidate them by making them ask for donations. What you should be doing is to ask them to make warm introductions between you, the fundraiser or the executive director, and bring them along to your meetings, but you run the show. I think that alleviates the stress that a lot of board members feel. For executive directors, I think the question oftentimes is, or development directors, who are our donors? Where do we find them? I think you need to know your donors. You need to know who they are before you look for more of them. And what that really means is you have to build donor personas, which is a marketing idea, to say, who are my donors? Are they MBAs, in finance? Are they older people who are thinking about planned giving? Know who your donors are before you start looking for more of them. And then you hang out where they are. I mean, you be on the social media platforms that they are interested in. Or do they like to get emails? Do they like to read newsletters? Would they rather receive texts? You have to really know who your donors are to find more of them. It's not really a scattershot approach. It's a very, again, strategic approach. And then speak to them in their language, meaning if they're younger people, it might be a little more casual. If they're older, it might be a little more formal. So get to know your donors before you start to look for more of them. And I think those three things are the major challenges that fundraising looks at the moment.
Yeah. Josh, you came off mute. I'm wondering if you wanted to add.
Yeah, we've already gotten some questions in the chat, it looks like, about boards, and Jill kind of teed that up. So I just wanted to slide in, because I think this is, at least for me, as working with nonprofits here at Taproot, this is one of the biggest struggles I kind of see, is boards are not properly engaged on fundraising efforts. Or the boards are not, no one on the board really feels comfortable with fundraising. Especially if you are a smaller nonprofit, which means you're probably relying on your board very heavily. This is something that could be a huge problem. And I think there's kind of two ways you can alleviate this. You can find a way to inspire your board members to be more active fundraisers. Or you can have some difficult conversations with your board members. And if need be, adjust your organization's bylaws and make the requirements for being a member of your board very, very direct and specific. I tend to think you should aim to get to the place where most of, if not all of, your board members are comfortable making some kind of ask, even integrated into the point where it's expected up front that when someone is potentially interested in joining your board, that you have some kind of give-get, that you make that, and give-get in the board building world is the goal, that this board member over their 3-year tenure or whatever is going to work towards or yearly goal that's going to work towards to bring money into your organization, whether that's donated services or direct cash donations. Your board definitely should be committed to fundraising. If they are not, you can potentially find an ally on the board, maybe a stronger member, maybe one who's kind of more interested in a leadership role, and try and turn them into an ally and say, we can't go on like this. We need you to help inspire the other board members to become fundraisers. Also, bringing in, thinking about pro bono consulting, bringing in, third-party consultants who can help. Your board members should be cultivating an atmosphere of storytelling all the time. And really, your organization should be doing that as well in order to successfully fundraise. Training your board members on how to make a pitch, giving that elevator pitch, as we like to call it, as Jill said. Can you answer the question from a donor? If I gave you $10,000 right now, what would you do with it? Can you show me demonstrated impact in your community? You should be able to kind of jump through all of that really, really quick, you should be able to reel it off as a board member. So there's deputizing an ally. There's also bringing in an outside consultant to help board training. And if that doesn't work, like I said, we need to have some difficult conversations about continued participation on the board if they're not willing to do that. Yeah, don't be afraid to make that decision, because ultimately this is the financial and fiduciary health of your organization. Yeah, I think very strongly everyone on the board should be trying to fundraise. And the last point I'll make there is donors now ask about this. They will ask, how much skin in the game do your board members have? How much have they donated? Or what's their give get? That's the sign of a serious, to someone who's potentially going to part with money at your organization. They want to know that your board members have skin in the game, that either have donated themselves or secured those donations. And they have now, donors will ask you about that. So, if for no other reason, make sure your board is doing fundraising.
I'd like to add one thing, if I may. Give get is very important. And for what Josh said is absolutely true, that it's important for them to have skin in the game and to make a contribution. But in my experience, and I've worked with boards, if you only tell them to give get, and they give or get, and then refuse to do anything else, then you really aren't making any kind of progress. There has to be activity as well as the give get. I mean, I've had many circumstances where donors gave what they were asked to give, and they never attended a board meeting, and they didn't make any warm introductions, and there was always a lot of excuses. I mean, when you choose people to be on your board, everything looks very nice. It's like a first date. Everything looks great. And then you get to know them and you say, oops, but then they're on your board for 2 years or so, or whatever, my caution here is that give get is very important, and I agree, but it cannot be the be all and end all. They have to be able to attract other people. Like I said, they have to talk up the organization as best they can, and make those warm introductions, because it doesn't end with the give get.
Yeah, thank you, Jill and Josh, for those perspectives. I know we could spend a whole conversation just on boards and how to best engage them. And when we're thinking of the infrastructure as a whole, it's definitely a piece of that. But I know that there can be some challenges specifically related to the grant perspective, which is another piece of that infrastructure. And Nicole, I'd want to hear your perspective there.
Oh. Sure. Yeah, thank you. Well, I do want to say that I have noticed on grants, there is often a question about boards, and sometimes you have to give the amount that the board has donated. So I feel like that's come more into the fore in more recent grants as well, where funders want to know about the board and their giving. But yeah, in terms of challenges with grants, I wrote down in my notes, over enthusiasm for grants, wanting to go for everything. So I think we sort of talked about that there can just be like, let's do it all. There's so many opportunities. And again, reiterating how important it is to have a strategy, knowing your priorities. I think I failed to say earlier, but others said, the importance of relationships, as we've been saying. So using your board to leverage any connections out there, people they know, and staff as well. That is all very important, and that is something you'd want to consider as well when you're thinking about your grants and what to go for. I also wrote down a challenge of people sometimes expecting very immediate results with grants, where it's like what we were saying, it's strategy. There's a lot of strategy to it. There are those few maybe that come into our lap where it's like amazing. Someone calls, they have a foundation, they're interested, but for the most part, it's a lot of research for grants prospecting, proposal writing, putting a program together. Sometimes a grant will force the organization to have to really take the idea, the concept that they've been thinking of wanting to do, and putting it down and figuring out all the nuts and bolts. So a grant can kind of propel you to plan. And then so on and so forth with grants. It's a whole cycle of, being in touch with your funders, reporting, applying again, cultivating relationships, stewarding relationships. So just the fact it can take a while. I've had grants. Sometimes a relationship is building for several years before we receive funding. And my last point here was just about being what I call grant ready, which is where sometimes you're all ready with your proposal, but you're not really ready with some of the supporting materials that are always required when you submit a grant, or most often required, which is your organizational budget, your 501c3 verification letter, maybe your organizational chart, bylaws, etc. I have worked with organizations where maybe there isn't a budget that's ready to go out, that's outward facing budget that you're comfortable having it seen by outside party. So really just an org charts and things like that, like it seems easy and things like that, but just taking the time to really get it together, because you're going to be repeatedly asked for those documents, and you don't want that to be the piece that's slowing you down. So I hope that covered it a little on some of the
absolutely.
grant challenges.
Yeah. And I think the one of the things that's sticking out from all of it is, again, the piece of having all of these things together, right? So it takes time to build up the infrastructure and to make sure you're actually ready to move on into the fundraising phase. And I think in thinking about some of those challenges or things that come together, it often takes a lot of time. And as we're looking at things that are changing quickly, I wanted to ask about how you have experienced shifts or addressed shifts as they've come up, if you've had to. And I think I'll start with Josh on this one, if you're comfortable sharing what you would do to approach a change.
I had to make sure I was unmuted there. I think there's kind of two things here when we're dealing with monkey wrenches that have been thrown into our plans. I think more and more, especially for fundraising efforts, nonprofits should assume that something might go wrong, something might change, and whenever you are strategizing about what you're going to do with fundraising, aim to make whatever effort you're doing. I'm not sure if this is a real word, but I'm going to make it up. Pivotable. So being able to design an event or a campaign with change in mind, you can adapt it to a certain situation. In maybe in a crisis or something like that. There were organizations, the best example of this obviously is during the pandemic over the past few years. Organizations that rely very heavily on events, to bring in a lot of their revenue, were particularly hampered obviously during that time. But there were organizations that were able to pivot their events into virtual models, for example. In kind of my own backyard at UNC Chapel Hill, there's an organization that puts on an annual event called Dance Marathon. It's for the Children's Hospital, and it's kind of like sponsoring people for like Race for the Cure or something. You stand up, you dance for 24 hours, you don't sleep, you don't sit, and you raise a bunch of money for the Children's Hospital. Obviously, you can't get everyone together to do that in the middle of a pandemic. But through very quick thinking, over a month or two, the event organizers were able to try and transition everything into a model that was virtual, because they had that contingency plan in place. I think building spontaneity and unpredictable things into your fundraising efforts to make them pivotable, if need be, is just a way you can get out ahead of that. Is go ahead and just factor it in, like with the Murphy's Law.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I'm wondering, Jill, do you have any thoughts to add there?
Yeah, regarding need to shift to pivot. I think the only constant is change. Nonprofits need to be prepared for economic downturns, disasters, staff changes, mission drift. I mean, if you have rigid systems, they won't be able to change. So you have to allow for change and also for growth. And for example, if your nonprofit decided to accept cryptocurrency as a new form of payment, can your system handle it? So you need to be able to grow and bring new ideas into the your system without collapsing. If does your customer management system integrate with it, your new email partner? I mean, you need to think a little bit ahead. It's like chess, I guess. You got to think a few moves ahead. I got to give quickly two real world examples of pivoting. We had a very wealthy a billionaire as one of our donors, and he was very well respected, and he was courted accordingly. And then one day he received a direct mail piece asking for a donation. You don't send direct mail to a billionaire. And he could have just thrown it away. How he even got to see it, you would think somebody would go through his mail. But he actually saw it, and he called it to our attention, and he was angry. He said, yeah, I give you millions of dollars. Why are you sending me a piece of direct mail? And what that points to is a lack of segmentation in the fundraising system, in the database. So we learned our lesson as an organization. Another thing quickly I got to bring to your attention is third-party events. If you get involved in a third-party event that really brings in nothing, that not a lot of money, no new donors, you're really wasting your staff's time. We had in a situation like this where somebody wanted to have a poker game, and we got involved and had to be there and had to do all the before and after stuff. And there was almost no money raised and no new donors. So again, be strategic about your events. If they're not going to bring in new donors or more money, then say thank you, but no thank you. So the whole idea, again, is to be able to pivot with any new situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Nicole, one thing I'd love to hear from you is specifically when we're thinking of switching language or having to change around how you talk about things, what are some ideas or things that you would want to highlight in terms of that?
Thank you. I think that's a good question. I mean, one of the things that happened, as we all know, recently was COVID. And that was a time when we had to shift a lot within our organization and tell our donors what we were doing, how we were responding as an organization to the pandemic and what was happening with staff and our clients. And so I know that there was just a lot of working on language, talking to all of our program staff, our senior leadership, our marketing, was also working on this. And so just being, open with your funders, letting them know what's going on. I think, like as others have said, change is just such a constant anyway. Like I feel like a lot of our grants will reflect things that have changed, new leadership, or program might close a certain, some of the work that it's doing, and needing to let our donors know either at the time of reporting, or sometimes it's, at times that aren't the time of reporting, that you just really want to be in touch and transparent. I hope that answered the question. And also just that idea of contingency planning with grants as well, that if you don't get the full funding for something, it might change what you're able to do. And that's often asked in grant applications, but also as an organization, thinking that through and being prepared for your various fundraising situation, like what is your best case? What is if all the money comes in, what can you do versus without it all, without as much as you thought. So I hope that answered your question, but just, getting the language together, being transparent, being authentic, knowing you're doing great work, even when times change, when times are hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate also the note you made about transparency. I think, Josh talked about contingency planning. Jill said be strategic and has continued to kind of share that message, but also the importance of transparency, whether it's in your grant reporting or in your relationships with donors as well. I really appreciate that point. And I'm looking at the time. I'm so excited that we've been able to continue this conversation, and I don't want to put a stop at it, but I think we'll try and wrap it up maybe by if you could share tools, systems, volunteers that have been helpful, or structures that could be helpful in supporting this, and then we'll kind of pivot towards that Q&A at the end. And maybe for this, we could start with Nicole. I know you had some resources you wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll be quick. But we did a little brainstorming of the team here about some resources for grant seeking. One being Candid, which is online. It's available to all of us. But under Candid is Foundation Directory, 990 Finder, which is where you can look at an organization's 990, which is their public tax record, and get a lot of good information on who's who and who they funded and at what amount. And then there's also other ones like other than Candid. I wanted to go back to Foundation Directory, which is a database of Candid, which is either a subscription service or you can access it without a subscription, but you get a lot less information. But your library should have a subscription to it if it's cost prohibitive for you to be on it. We'll provide a list, I believe, right? But there's Cause IQ, ProPublica also have great nonprofit resources. I saw in the chat someone had said Grant Station. That's another database that's good for grant seeking. They also have a free newsletter. Just being on your community, different email lists, government grants lists, Rotary clubs, junior leagues, townships, all mailing lists, being very involved or getting a lot of information. Your elected representatives, I think I said that. Google artificial intelligence can be helpful as you search. And I'm just going through it really quickly. Taproot, that's great, things like this. And also the use of, just really quickly, in the past, in some of my work, I've had somebody helping just doing grants prospecting a couple of hours a week. It can be a student, somebody who has some time on their hands, and that's helpful too. So just any way you can add capacity to your work, to your grant seeking, grants prospecting, development research as a whole is helpful. But I went through that very fast because I know we're low on time.
Yeah, and we'll definitely share that list out. I dropped it in the chat here. But Jill, I'd love to hear if there's any you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, there's a lot I want to add, and I can't do it in a minute. But what I wanted to say, we were going to talk about the foundation of your nonprofit and how to build. And the first thing you really need to have is a good CRM, a customer relationship management system. That's so important. From that, everything flows. That's really your database about all your donors and donations and all contact that you have with them. So good CRM is really important. I would suggest you look on LinkedIn. If you're not on there already, get on there and look for people to follow who are involved in fundraising, because there's so much information to have. Candid, as Nicole mentioned, is a tremendous resource. And by the way, they have a Go for Gold program, which if you can get a gold seal from Candid, you can have a free access to their foundation directory online. So look into Candid. They have a wonderful blog. They have so much information. For presentations, social media, Canva, C-A-N-V-A, Canva is excellent. And they also have their pro version is free for nonprofits if you meet their eligibility. And all this will be included in the notes. And then volunteerism. I know Grace talked a lot about Taproot and what it has available. I've been a volunteer for 5 years and worked with a number of wonderful organizations. So I would say that think about how you can use volunteers in your organization and treat them as if they were an employee. Don't ignore them. Respect their time. Thank them for what they've done, and you can start some really great relationships.
Thank you, Jill. And I'll speak on behalf of Jill's volunteerism. She's been very helpful in terms of providing that perspective. And again, we'll follow up with some of these. I'm seeing some good dialogue in the chat also about some tools. Josh, I'm wondering if you could round us out, maybe provide a little bit more about what volunteers could do for the infrastructure, and then we'll open the floor.
Yeah. So in terms of skilled volunteers and pro bono consultants, every leg of kind of developing that fundraising infrastructure is a place where you could engage them. Maybe you need support with graphic design, for making pitches and advertising your organization. Maybe you need help with the technical aspect of things. So the Taproot Plus Marketplace is a great place to go for that. I also dropped in the chat a list of fundraising software and platforms that I think could be very, very beneficial if you haven't done any research into fundraising platforms yet. This is something, some of them have CRMs built into them. This is something I think to invest in, because we didn't get to touch on this as much as, some other things, but Jill was touching on it a little bit, that once you have donors in your system, stewardship and maintaining those donors, making them feel kind of constantly plugged in, that you haven't forgotten about them. I think there was a question from Juanita, I believe, earlier about donors becoming stale. These types of softwares are great for making sure your donors don't become stale, that they are kind of constantly plugged in. The more data you can collect about the people who are donating to your organization, I think the better. It's good if you have a successful fundraising effort, try and invest time into figuring out why it was successful, whereas other efforts weren't. What is the donor profile? Who are the types of people that are donating to your organization? Should you continue? Is this an audience you should help cultivate? Is this a target donor profile you should be going after? You can only figure that out if you're collecting data about the donors. So tech that allows you to collect that data. There are, for those of you who are bootstrapping, and are like, we don't have a lot of funds and it's just me and another person, there are freemium versions of some of this fundraising software. If you like the way it works, maybe you shell out some cash for it as well. So there are, like I said, freemium versions of some of these. But go ahead and start considering the technical aspect with one of these platforms as well.
Yeah, awesome, Josh. Thank you for running us out there. And I apologize, everyone. I did not leave us very much time for questions, but I will note that we have kind of collected them all, and we'll try to do our best to share those in our follow-up or directly to you all. And I know there are some pre-submitted ones. We'll do the same for those too. But didn't want to interrupt our conversation. I know it was flowing with a lot of important insights. And I just want to thank our panelists today for their time and I know they put a lot of effort into preparing. So it was some very thoughtful responses. I know that was very helpful for me to learn, and hopefully for our audience today as well. But really, I hope this event was a good overview into kind of some of those topics that are top of mind right now. And if you're looking for more ways to get support around them, Taproot is a great support. We just launched 3 more templates that are project templates, which are geared towards getting support for fundraising infrastructure. So if you have questions about that, definitely reach out to us and we'd be happy to provide more information. But really, yes, just a round of applause to our panelists, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, everybody.